Good morning. My name is Sebastian Arnasteni, metric number 107364. Today I'm going to present introduction for my group assignment EBE 1113 Microeconomics. My group has chosen Japan as our microeconomic analysis. Japan, Nihon, or Nippon, the land of the rising sun, an island nation where ancient tradition harmonize with cutting-edge innovation. A country with a history stretching back to the 3rd century, but now standing as the one of the most technological advanced society in the world. With the world's third largest economy, boasting a nominal GDP of 4.19 trillion in 2025. Japan wields global influence through its tech powers, export-driven industries, and highly skilled workforce. Automotive giants like Toyota, Honda, and Nissan dominate global production, while Sony and Panasonic lead in consumer electronics. Japan supplies 45% of the world industrial robots, a testament to its precision engineering. Yet, beneath this success lies a struggle. Yield of deflation relies on imported energy and the world's highest public debt, which is 260% of GDP, pose a serious risk. Add to that a demographic crisis, a shrinking population with 30% over 60 and a fertility rates far below replacement level. Rural towns fed as youth flock to Tokyo, leave behind ghost town. Politically, Japan is a constitutional monarchy with the emperor as a ceremonial symbol and the real power resting with the prime minister and the national diet. The Liberal Democratic Party has ruled for decades. Prioritize security amid tension with China and North Korea. While critics point to the aging leadership, but bureaucratic stagnation. But Japan is adapting. Society 2.0 push digital transformation while renewable energy invests aim for the carbon neutrality by 2050. Immigration reform seek to attract skilled workers and robotic aids elderly care, yet cultural resistance to change remains a hallmark. At its core, Japan is a paradox, a high-tech giant grappling with a human sustainability, a nation balancing tradition and globalization, ambition and reality. But how Japan navigates this tension will shape not just its future, but its legacy in 21st century.
Assalamualaikum and very good morning. My name is Ahmad Khairi bin Muhammad Yassin. My matrix number is 103124 and I am going to present my part, which is macroeconomic issues identification. The two macroeconomic issues affecting Japan are demographic challenges and dependency on raw material imports. Reasons why Japan is having a demographic challenge. Okay. As you can see here, there are 4 reasons why. The first reason, Japan lost decade. Japan lost decade happened in 1991 when the asset bubble burst. This asset bubble burst caused economic slowdown, reduced household income, and reduced job security. Next, work culture. Prioritize cooperation well-being first before his or herself. In other words, the Japanese worker will disregard his or herself and will prioritize the cooperation. Because of this, many Japanese workers will work themselves to death. This phenomena is called koroshi, which means work to death. Other than that, long working hours. Urbanization. Urbanization is the concentration of people in one area. Because of this concentration of people, the limited resources in that area must be shared by a large amount of people that causes the housing that causes housing and cost of living to increase. Last but not least, increased life expectancy. People live longer because of medical advancements and healthcare. And total fertility rate dropped below 2.1 births per woman caused the young population to decrease. In other words, because of medical advancements and healthcare, people live longer, but because of this drop in fertility, there are less younger people in the country. Reasons: Japan is dependent on raw material imports. Okay. The first reason: limited domestic natural resources. Japan doesn't have large deposit of natural resources. So, to be clear, Japan has natural resources, but it doesn't come in abundance. It is just in small quantities. But because of this limited domestic natural resources, they need to import natural resources from overseas or from other countries. Next, high energy demand. High energy demand from industrial, residential, and transportation sector. In 2024, Japan imported 81 billion USD worth of energy resources to to meet the demand from the industrial, residential, and transportation sector, and and also to produce goods for exports to grow their country's economy. Next, nuclear reactor shutdowns. In 2011, 30% of Japan energy production is nuclear, but because of the Fukushima nuclear disaster, Japan shut down all of its 54 nuclear reactors. So to fill the energy gap left from the nuclear reactor shutdowns, Japan increased the import of energy resources such as oil, coal, and LNG, liquefied natural gas. Last but not least, limited usable land. Japan doesn't have a lot of available land because Japan is a mountainous country. To be precise, 73% of Japan landmass are mountains. So Japan need to be stingy with this limited usable land. So then they can either pick to use the land for housing or for agriculture and mining. So because of this, Japan use the land for housing. So Japan needs to import raw material from overseas. The effects of demographic challenges on society and economy of Japan. The first effect, shrinking labor force. There are more retirees than workers. There are fewer workers to replace the retired ones. Because of this situation, there are a lot of labor shortage. Because of this situation, there are a lot of labor shortages in Japan. Next, reduce consumption. Older people spend less than young people. Older people spend money on essential goods and services such as healthcare, and medication. And pressure on public finance. Government need to go into debt to pay the pensions and healthcare of the older generation, and increase taxes for the working population. But if the taxes collected is not enough, the national debt will increase. Next, reduce productivity and innovation. The younger population is more productive than the older population. This is because the older generation is more healthier and is more healthy and doesn't have any kind of illness, so they are more productive. And younger people are more innovative because they are more open to new ideas and technology. Last but not least, changing consumption pattern. The consumption pattern of a country reflects the demographic of the country. For example, if the majority of the population in that country are kids, most of the consumption are on toys. So, next. The effects of being dependent on raw material imports on the economy and society of Japan. For the first effect, vulnerable to price shocks. Japan doesn't have control on the raw materials. For example, Japan imports most of its oil from the Middle East, so Japan doesn't have control of it because that oil is being produced and extracted from another country. For the second effect, trade deficit. Japan imports raw material from overseas. So if Japan doesn't maintain its export competitiveness, trade deficit will happen. So in other words, if Japan imports more than it exports, the trade deficit will happen. So Japan needs to maintain its export competitiveness to avoid this trade deficit problem. For the third effect, inflation. Raw material imports price increases will cost push inflation to happen. So because of this, the prices of goods and services will increase, and we will force producers to and will force the producers to push the price increases to the consumers, causing inflation. Last but not least, geopolitical tensions. The origin of the raw material might be from a conflict-prone location or from an adversarial nation. Raw material imports may be cut off because a conflict happened or for political tensions between countries. For example, in 2011, there's a territorial dispute between China and Japan. Because of this territorial dispute, China halted all of its rare earth exports to Japan. Because of this export being halted by China, mm, Japan's electronic sector suffered.
Since 2013, Japan's monetary policy has been its most aggressive and long-standing response to prolonged economic stagnation. That year, the Bank of Japan, or BOJ, introduced quantitative and qualitative easing, or in short QQE, which involved large-scale purchase of government bonds and financial assets. The goal was to inject liquidity into the economy and raise inflation expectations. In 2016, the BOJ went further by introducing negative interest rate. This was meant to encourage commercial banks to lend more rather than hold excess reserves. At the same time, the BOJ implemented yield curve control, keeping 10-year bonds yields around the 0% to stabilize long-term borrowing costs. These policies were grounded in Keynesian economic theory, which supports increased spending during periods of weak demand. While they initially led to a depreciation of the yen, boosting export and helping stabilize financial markets, the 2% inflation target remained out of reach. Moreover, the prolonged low interest rate environment reduced bank profitability, raising concern about financial sector health. Alongside monetary policy, Japan pursued expansionary fiscal measures to stimulate domestic demand. Over the years, the government introduced multiple stimulus packages, which include infrastructure investment, direct cash payment to household, and subsidies for business. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Japan launched one of the largest fiscal support programs in the world relative to its GDP. This action helped cushion the economy from recession and provide much-needed short-term relief. However, the downside was a sharp increase in public debt, which show exceeds 260% of GDP. This creates a major constraint on Japan's ability to continue relying on fiscal stimulus, especially without significant structural changes to manage this debt burden. Japan also implemented structural reforms under the third era of Abenomics, introduced in 2012 by Prime Minister Shizo Abe. This reform aimed to address long-standing issues such as rigid labor market, low productivity, and underutilization of women and older workers. Key initiatives include encouraging female participation in the workforce, reforming corporate governance, and promoting innovation through deregulation. These efforts are designed to improve the economy supply side efficiency, aligning with classical economic thinking. While there was measurable progress in increasing women's employment, the overall pace of reform was slow and inconsistent. Deep-rooted demographic challenges like an aging population and low birth rates continue to limit the effectiveness of these reforms. Japan's response to its economic stagnation has been broad and multifaceted. Monetary policy helped stabilize markets and support growth in the short term, but failed to generate lasting inflation. Fiscal policy provided essential relief, especially during crises, but led to an unsustainable level of public debt. Structural reforms showed more promise but fell short in fully addressing Japan's long-term demographic and institutional challenge. The key takeaway is that no single policy area was fully successful on its own. Going forward, Japan will need more integrated and balanced approach, one that aligns monetary and fiscal strategies, while accelerating meaningful structural reforms. Only through this combination can Japan achieve sustainable growth amid the pressures of an aging society.
Okay, now I want to talk about the application of macroeconomic principle. In this part, we will talk about the three macroeconomic principles to analyze the issue and policy. There is ISLM model, solo growth model, and ADAS model. Okay, first I want to talk about the ISLM model. The aging population leads to the low consumption distress and low aggregate demand, and the friends are afraid to take out the loan to invest in the market expectation because of the bad economic situation. This will cause the IS curve shift to the left from IS0 to IS1. Second, they talk about the Japanese government. They have adopted monetary policy and the LM curve will shift to the downwards, but because of the liquidity trap, the policy failed to the work, so that the curve of LM there is no change. The last, at the same time, the government also adopt the fiscal policy to push the aggregate demand, and it will let the IS curve shift to the right from IS1 to IS2. Okay, now I want to talk about the second principle is a solo growth model. In this model, the most important formula is the y equal to the a times the function k and l. In this formula, that y is economic growth and the a is the technological progress, k is the capital accumulated, and the l is the labor force. First, I'll talk about the issue. They again to the population and the decline in the birth rate will reduce the size of Japan local level force. Then means that the L will decrease, and the fin will reduce the investment to lead a decrease in capital accumulation because the K decrease, and the progress technological research and the development will slow down because of the reduce of investment from fin, and the growth rate becomes slow. This means that the A growth rate will become slow. Now we'll talk about the policy the government take. Okay, first, the government encourage the employee for women and the elder. There is to bigger let the Japanese local level bigger than elder increase. And besides that, the government also have a fiscal subsidy by increasing the government spending and attracts the investment to increase the capital accumulated. They will cause the K increase. Lastly, the government also have invest in the key scientific and technological fields such as hydrogen energy, semiconductor, and AI to improve the productivity through technology progress. There's the A increase. Okay, now I want to talk about the last principle is the ADAS model. The issue that Japan faces the depending on the important energy. That means that when the important energy price rise, it will cause the big effect for the Japan economy and also cause the cost push inflation, price will rising and then will falling the output of the Japan. And then the AS curve will shift to the left, and you can see the graph in the right side. The SIS 0 curve will shift to the left to the SIS 1. Besides that, the energy depending on import also will weaken the LIS curve growth potential because they not have the self-sufficient energy. To solve this issue, the Japanese government have moved the SIS shift to the right by the fiscal policy energy subsidy, and for the LIS curve, the government need to be investing in the renewable energy such as solar energy, wind energy, and hydro energy to replace the import energy in the future time.
My name is Fardila Adila. Let's look at Japan's economy and some of the problems it's facing. Japan has a strong economy thanks to its technology and industry, but now it's struggling with an aging population and high government spending. Two big challenges are few people working, which means less spending and more pressure on the government. Japan also depends a lot on imports like oil and gas, so price changes can really affect them. These problems started after the lost decade in the 1990s and were made worse by long working hours, low birth rates, and people living longer. To fix this, Japan uses low interest rates to get people to spend government spending on projects and support, and reforms to help women and older people join the workforce. Economists use models to explain this, like the ISLM model and Solo model, which show how aging affects the economic growth. That's all for this part. Let's move on to the next slide.
Future implication: demographic decline and labor shortage. Over 28% of the population is age 65 plus. Working age population may be shrink by one-third by 2050. It also leads to pressure on pension and healthcare, decline in tax revenue and domestic consumption. Also chronic labor shortage across industry. Japan faced a tough choice between immigration reform and regulated automation, neither offering a full solution. Without intervention, Japan risks stagnant growth and losing global economic status. Heavy dependence on imported raw materials imports 90% of rare earths and nearly all fossil fuels, expose key sectors such as technology, auto defense to supply chain stock shocks and geopolitical risks, especially from China's monopoly. Efforts like urban mining and supply diversification are ongoing but limited. Without improved supply chain resilience, Japan's economic security and technological edge may be at risk in a resource-scarce future.